Добрий день, я вітаю.
Hello, welcome who has joined us. This is Ukraine Media Center at Ukrinform, and thank you for joining us today.
Сьогодні триває
It's 102nd day of the full-scale invasion of our land by the Russian Federation. We will hear now about the situation in Donetsk region from Pavlo Kyrylenko, the head of the military administration. Pavlo, can you share about the previous day in Donetsk region? We saw that the shells have intensified. What are the consequences? Yes, indeed. There are attacks along the contact line and attacks on the cities far away from it. There were missile attacks and artillery attacks on Slavyansk, on Drushkivka, Konstantinivka, Bakhmut and Soledar cities. And as I have mentioned, Avdiivka, Maryanka, Krasnohorivka, Krasnodar-Toretsk, this is the contact line. Contact line is in the same place. The enemy is unsuccessful in their attempts of advance, and they are getting back to the positions they have taken long ago. Recently, you have written that Boghorodechny has been liberated, that there is Ukrainian flag there right now. What is the situation? What's happening in Svetohirsk? The cities, speaking of Boghorodechny, this is the suburb of Svetohirsk. There was the official message after completion of the stabilization activities. So at this moment, when I'm commenting the events in Boghorodechny and in Svetohirsk community, the stabilization activities are going on. We are fully ready to provide humanitarian aid and the medicines and all the necessary payments. So these are the stabilization activities, and this also includes the installation of the Ukrainian local government. We will soon inform about the outcomes of these activities, and also in terms of evacuation. This will also be one of the first actions taken in these deoccupied places, because many of the residential districts were damaged, and it's very difficult to live there now. So how many people were evacuated since the beginning of compulsory evacuation? Over 16,000 people were evacuated, but before it was introduced, 3/4 of the population of the region has already been evacuated. So what is happening in Liman? All of us watching the events there, we see the messages from the Luhansk military administrator. We understand the expectations of people of Luhansk region, because we understand that this point is very necessary for liberation of the entire region. So right now there are combat operations taking place. The successful counter-offense, and then happens the deoccupation, including the occupation of Liman, and we are following the algorithm the same as usual. Once we hear from the military command and the president of Ukraine, once we see that our stabilization activities are effective, there are then messages from the local governments. What is the humanitarian situation in Kramatorsk, Slaviansk, Bakhmut, which are under constant shellings of the Russians? The situation is stable and controlled. Food is available. There are evacuation routes. They are, in fact, operating. The local governments are there, and the critical infrastructure, despite the constant attempts of the enemy, especially since the beginning of last week and this week as well, the enemy is trying to target the civilian infrastructure, including electricity, water and heat supply, but the municipal services are working effectively to quickly restore the supply of electricity and also have all the critical infrastructure functional in the region and in the cities that are victims to the constant shelling, such as Slaviansk and Bakhmut and Kramatorsk. In Bakhmut, there are issues with electricity supply. For a couple of days, the electricity lines were disrupted, but we are dealing with this, trying to make sure they are restored as fast as possible. So you are speaking of the localities where Ukrainian flag has been brought back. Are we ready to help people evacuating from there? Are we ready to host them somewhere? Yes, sure. We see that we have regions that are hosting the evacuated IDPs, primarily the residents of Donetsk region, and the algorithm here as well is well developed. People know where to go. They are traveling free of charge. They know in which conditions they are going to live in. They are going to get free food, and they will be able to travel with children and the elderly, for which they will have financial support. The local governments still work, and the president makes all the necessary and timely decisions for the regional administrations, and in the cities during the occupation, and we are expecting the occupation of the entire region, we are working a step ahead. We are getting ready with all the necessary supplies for the stabilization activities. So this work is being done beforehand, before the occupation of a new community. We already see messages about the deoccupied territories of Kharkiv region, and it is understandable that people all the time were in a kind of information vacuum. They do not understand many things. They do not understand what was happening in those territories. Did you have a chance of speaking to your people in the deoccupied territories? Do you see the same? Well, as a rule, we have such communication in places where we manage to evacuate people, and right now mainly these activities are happening in Kharkiv region, but here in Donetsk region, the enemy is still attempting to get through our defense, especially near Bakhmut and Avdiivka. So we need to be very clear, and we need not underestimate the enemy. no matter how shameful their activities are. But yes, the information vacuum is there, and this problem will be addressed after the occupation of the region and after the stabilization of this situation. Then we will ensure the proper work with the population. There will be information campaign to deliver trustworthy information, and this work is already established in the region. Uh, I sometimes lack the time to actually speak to the people. So I'm doing my daily work. I'm avoiding some kind of sensational statements, but this information campaign will happen, and all the disinformation of Russians, all the propaganda will be counterattacked, and it will only continue to influence people in the Russian Federation. Hello. Can you please describe more about the stabilization activities in the deoccupied territories? This implies the law enforcement work, special services, discovering the possible collaborators in those deoccupied territories, and also restoring the local governments in these territories. So these processes are happening in parallel. The work of the special services, the law enforcement, the military government, and assisting the local population. So I put it shortly because maybe I don't want to unveil all the details, but none of these stabilization activities are intended to somehow punish the locals, but the intention is to restore the government and to protect the rights and freedoms of the residents. So it's a kind of defiltration of the population. No, I wouldn't use this word. It's the occupiers that are using this approach. Basically, they are humiliating people, neglecting their rights and freedoms. Here, in this case, we are using the word stabilization because this way we are bringing everything back to the requirements of the current Ukrainian legislation, and also the legal responsibility, mainly criminal responsibility, for those who have collaborated or still collaborated with the enemy. This is what we are doing. So we know that not everyone wants to evacuate from Donetsk region. So are you taking any statements from the people who don't want to evacuate? Well, the compulsory evacuation is being done through evacuation commissions in the local administrations, and yes, first and foremost, it has to do with families with multiple children, children with disabilities, etc. In this case, we are relying on the choice of the person, understanding that there are different processes involved, and I can clearly say that people have both rights and duties. So wherever there is such a need, wherever this is compulsory to get evacuated, the person signs the document if the don't want to evacuate. In other cases, it's up to the person to choose. And also, well, mainly it has to do with families with many children and families with older parents. We inform them about the danger they are living in, especially in the communities that are under constant shellings. So these statements about refusal to evacuate, this is indeed what people are signing in case they are ready to sign such a document. Thank you. And speaking of the fuel, is there enough coal for the heating of the private buildings, and is there any extraction of coals? Yes, it's still happening, but there are deficits in one of the communities which needs more coal for the work of its thermal facilities. So we are discussing this with the relevant ministry, discussing how this coal will be provided to the community and how it will be possible to get this coal. And also there are other issues associated with this, the buying of furnaces, of the boilers, of the modular boilers for the support of critical infrastructure. Thank you. Thank you, Pavlo. Thank you for joining us. And yes, this was Pavlo Kyrylenko, the head of the regional military administration in Donetsk. Our next briefing is going to take place at 12:30. I will have Mykola Rudik discussing the online services of issuing driver's licenses. So stay with us. Let's believe in our victory.